When the LEGO Movie was first announced, I, like many people, expected nothing more than a soulless feature-length commercial. So subsequently, when I did see the movie, it was probably one of the best surprises I've ever had watching a film. Not only is the film extremely funny, clever and heartfelt, but it really is a story that could only be told through LEGO, being so tied to its history and cultural significance. The story itself is framed in an equally familiar Chosen One style narrative, where Emmett, an ordinary construction worker, becomes entangled in an ancient prophecy and ultimately must save the world. And at first the message too seemed just as straightforward, a battle between conformity and creativity. But if we start to deconstruct this conflict, these ideas of creativity and conformity can themselves be read through different analyses. Whether it's a criticism of capitalism in overpriced coffee, freedom in how citizens are told what to do and think, copyright in how old things are prevented from being turned into something new, or what I'm most interested in, identity. But before we get into the broad concept of identity, I think it's important to consider how the film might treat ideas of copyright and intellectual property. Concepts that are particularly relevant as the film not only deals with issues of creative thinking, in following instructions or not questioning established tastes, but also the desire to keep things separate, segregated. Lord Business wants to keep Bricksburg away from Middle Zealand away from the Old West, but
people everywhere are always messing with my stuff.
A phrase I'm sure has crossed the mind of many a copyright holder, possibly while watching this very video. And there's a great video over at Idea Channel that discusses this in depth, as well as the legal struggles that the LEGO Movie itself faced in licensing so many different properties. But while these copyright issues apply to businesses like LEGO and films like the LEGO Movie, the issues within the film itself seem more personal. There's definitely an interesting case for copyright here, but if we take the approach that,
"Sir, it's not personal. It's just business,"
we ignore the fact that this story becomes personal. Really personal. And that's why I think this obsession with order, structure, the way things are supposed to be, is as much about our own identity as it is about any external concept. The idea of community is central to the conflict of the film. From Emmett's desire to fit in, have everybody like you and always be happy, to the Master Builder's inability to work as a team, to the entire LEGO population working together to defeat Lord Business in the final battle. But this idea of teamwork can also be extended to the act of making new stuff from old stuff, a process that becomes a collaboration between the original creator and the recreator. Whether you're making a robot out of construction machinery, an epic story out of a set model world, or a movie out of LEGO. When referring to the difficulties of licensing different properties such as DC, Harry Potter or Star Wars, director Chris Miller actually states how this is something they could only do with LEGO, because they are the only company with the power to license so many properties. But equally, this story is something that could only be done with LEGO because of its cultural and emotional baggage. And the whole film is made more effective, more powerful from this collaboration. Set against this background, the battle of creativity and conformity then becomes a personal negotiation of identity between the individual and the collective. Whether we struggle with conflicting desires to both fit in and stand out, to define ourselves as an individual or a community, to try and maintain the identity of an original creation or to allow it to grow, evolve, inform and be informed by other ideas. These negotiations demand a certain amount of fluidity. And this is where the LEGO Movie's take on such a traditional narrative structure and familiar characters can actually be seen to reinforce this idea of fluid identity, as each character initially plays into a well-known archetype, whether in Emmett becoming the special, or the one, or the boy who lived, or the dragon warrior, Wildstyle as the highly skilled expert, Vitruvius as the teacher. They all come to redefine these roles by the end of the film. Emmett isn't really prophesized as the chosen one, but he can no longer see himself as simply a construction worker, and so he can no longer define himself by these characteristics. Vitruvius reveals the prophecy is fake, thus diminishing, if not entirely removing, the perception of him as the grand authority, and Wildstyle becomes Lucy, letting go of the persona she created out of her own insecurities. By the end of the film, all characters transcend their initial title, and the new identities that take their place are less rigid, and always with the potential to change. Of course, what is revealed as the ultimate conflict, what has been the secret driving force behind the entire film, is actually that of childhood and adulthood. And childhood all but embodies these ideas of fluidity, not only in associations of imagination and creativity, but also in freedom and possibility, not yet being defined by a job or title as we might be defined as adults. Not that the film is advocating a return to childhood, but just that we as adults should maybe reconsider how we might be gluing ourselves in place. To accept that human identity can't be separated into easy categories or fixed permanently, even if there is a tempting simplicity to that approach.
Look at all of these things that people built. You might see a mess. What I see are people inspired by each other and by you. People taking what you made and making something new out of it.
There's something strangely satisfying about the uniformity of the construction and movement in the film. Like the oddly satisfying compilations of machinery slicing, carving, organising, things slotting perfectly into place that have become so popular online. As humans, we are drawn to this type of conformity as much as we desire to rage against it. A desire for simplicity and to believe that the world and we ourselves are this simple, and not the mess of anxiety, depression, fear, anger and confusion that we actually are. The Lego world is a mess because, frankly, people are a mess. I find it funny that Wildstyle constantly denies that she's a DJ, not just because it's a joke, but because, in a way, she is. In his essay Post-Production Culture as Screenplay, Nicholas Boryard suggests that it is no longer a matter of elaborating a form on the basis of a raw material, but working with objects that are already in circulation on the cultural market, which is to say, objects already informed by other objects. Notions of originality, being at the origin of, and even of creation, making something from nothing, are slowly blurred in this new cultural landscape marked by the twin figures of the DJ and the programmer, both of whom have the task of selecting cultural objects and inserting them into new contexts. And while this might subscribe to the master builder philosophy, elevating the role of the artist, the Lego Movie concludes that not only are the master builders DJs and programmers, but we all are. The Lego Movie shows that just as Lord Business can't keep different worlds separate, we cannot separate identities into simple ideas. We're not the worker, the rebel, the superhero, the guide, the villain, the adult, the child. We change and evolve constantly, and we can't fight that no matter how many hands-off signs we put up. In fact, not unlike the interpretations of the Lego Movie itself, because the film is, or rather can be, about all of these things. Capitalism, copyright, freedom, identity. As its open narrative allows it to be free from the creator's intentions, and to be much more about what that narrative can become, what we can build from it, especially when we work together. Hey everyone, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I did making it. This is actually probably one of my favourite films, and this video was particularly fun to make. You know, it's nice to talk about something happy for a change. If you have any thoughts about the video or the film in general, please do leave them down in the comments, and I hope I'll see you next time.